And I never thought being told to use the back door at my sister's Thanksgiving dinner would change everything. For years, my family treated me like I was less than them, but that Thursday finally pushed me past my breaking point. Where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family. Trust me, by the end of a story, you'll see why standing up for yourself is worth it. Growing up, our family always had enough, but we were decidedly middle class. My father Ralph worked as a sales manager at a local furniture store, while my mother Diana was an administrative assistant at an insurance company. We lived in a modest three-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood, drove reliable but unremarkable cars, and took the occasional weekend trip to nearby tourist spots rather than fancy vacations. My sister Veronica, for years older than me, seemed determined to escape this perfectly adequate existence from an early age. While I was content playing soccer at the local park and hanging out with neighborhood friends, Veronica was strategically befriending the daughters of doctors and lawyers, angling for invitations to country club events, and meticulously curating her wardrobe with the few designer pieces our parents could afford. "Presentation is everything, Abby." She'd lecture me while I sprawled on my bed reading medical journals. "Nobody cares how smart you are if you look like you don't care about yourself." The real turning point in our family dynamic came when our parents divorced 10 years ago. I was 18 and heading to college on a partial scholarship, while Veronica was 22 and already dating Russell, whose family owned a chain of successful car dealerships. The divorce was messy, not because they fought over assets, there weren't many, but because of the emotional fallout. Our mother Diana latched onto Veronica's rising social status through her relationship with Russell. Suddenly, Mom was getting invited to charity galas as Veronica's plus one, was shopping at stores she'd previously only walked past wistfully, and was basking in the reflected glory of her elder daughter's successful life choices. Dad, meanwhile, retreated into a bachelor apartment and threw himself into work, appearing only periodically for obligatory family events. I chose nursing school partly because I genuinely wanted to help people, but also because it offered a clear path to financial independence. Working night shifts at the hospital while taking full course loads during the day meant I rarely saw my family during those years, which perhaps accelerated our growing distance. When I did show up for holidays or birthdays, conversations felt increasingly strained. "Still wearing scrubs all day?" Veronica would ask with a practiced, sympathetic smile. "I could connect you with Olivia's cousin who works in hospital administration. Much better hours, and you'd get to wear real clothes." My mother was no better. "Nursing is respectable," she'd say, somehow making it sound like I'd chosen to become a street sweeper. "But wouldn't you rather specialize in something more prestigious? Russell's sister knows an aesthetic nurse who does Botox for celebrities." My father, when he bothered to comment at all, would just shrug and say, "As long as it pays the bills," before returning to whatever sporting event was playing on TV. None of them understood that I found genuine fulfillment in my work. The night I held an elderly man's hand as he took his last breath, whispering to him that it was okay to let go while his family was stuck in traffic. The morning I helped deliver twins during an emergency when the doctor couldn't arrive in time. The countless moments of human connection that transcended status or wealth completely eluded my status-conscious family. Meanwhile, Veronica's wedding to Russell 3 years ago was the social event of the season, at least in our family's eyes. She'd finally secured her position by marrying into money, and our mother couldn't have been prouder. I served as bridesmaid, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly rent, standing silently as relatives cooed over how Veronica had done so well for herself. As if marrying rich was an accomplishment rather than luck. Last year, Veronica and Russell moved into a sprawling colonial-style home in an exclusive neighborhood. I later learned they were actually renting it, not buying, because Russell's business had hit some rough patches. But the facade was all that mattered. My one-bedroom apartment, though clean and comfortable, became the subject of pitying looks whenever it came up in conversation. "You know, with all the hours you work, you could surely afford something better," my mother once commented while visiting. She'd insisted on bringing her own coffee rather than drinking what I offered, claiming my grocery store brand gave her migraines. The last family gathering before this Thanksgiving had been my nephew Tyler's birthday in September. I'd been seated at a folding table with Russell's teenage cousins while the adults enjoyed the formal dining setup. When I mentioned my recent promotion to charge nurse, my mother nodded distractedly before turning to regale everyone with stories about Veronica's latest charity committee appointment. Despite all this, some stubborn part of me kept showing up. Maybe it was the lingering hope that they'd eventually see me, really see me, and value what I'd built on my own terms. Or perhaps it was just the gravitational pull of family obligation that's nearly impossible to escape, no matter how toxic the atmosphere becomes. So when the Thanksgiving invitation came via group text, Veronica addressing everyone but adding a pointed yes, even you, Abby, if you can get coverage at work, I found myself grudgingly planning to attend, even as I dreaded every aspect of the gathering. What I never expected was that this particular Thanksgiving would finally force everything into the open, beginning with a simple instruction to use the back door. Thanksgiving morning dawned gray and chilly. My alarm blared at 7 after I'd worked until midnight the previous night. 3 patients had coded during my shift, and though we'd managed to stabilize them all, the emotional and physical drain left me feeling hollow. Still, family obligation called. I shuffled to the bathroom, wincing at my reflection. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my skin looked pale from too many hours under hospital fluorescence. Pulling out my rarely used makeup bag, I attempted to transform myself into someone my family might approve of, someone who didn't look quite so worn. What does one wear to be subtly insulted for 6 hours? I muttered, flipping through my closet. I settled on dark jeans, boots, and a burgundy sweater that a patient's grateful daughter had given me last Christmas. Professional enough to deflect comments about my uniform, but comfortable enough to endure the day. Despite my exhaustion, I'd stayed up an extra hour last night preparing a homemade apple pie. Veronica would undoubtedly have ordered some Instagram-worthy dessert spread from an upscale bakery, but bringing something homemade was my small rebellion. My grandmother's recipe, with a cinnamon sugar crust that used to make everyone fight for the last slice before my family became too sophisticated for homemade treats. As I carefully placed the pie in a carrier, my phone chimed with a text from my mother. Don't forget to bring those folding chairs from your father's garage. Veronica needs extra seating. I sighed. Apparently, I was expected to swing by my father's place, load up his bulky metal folding chairs, and transport them across town. Never mind that my compact car barely fit my own belongings, much less furniture. The text hadn't even included a please or thank you. The check engine light blinked ominously as I pulled into my father's driveway. He wasn't home. Probably at his girlfriend Catherine's place, but he'd left the garage unlocked as promised. 4 heavy folding chairs waited inside, stacked against the wall. I loaded them awkwardly into my back seat, rearranging my pie and overnight bag to make everything fit. Traffic crawled along the highway. My anxiety mounted with each passing minute, knowing that my tardiness would become another mark against me. Abigail doesn't value family time, they'd whisper. Too caught up in her own little world. Veronica's neighborhood screamed exclusivity. Perfectly manicured lawns stretched before houses that looked like they'd been plucked from architectural magazines. Her rental stood imposingly at the end of a cul-de-sac, all symmetrical windows and stately columns. I parked on the street, not wanting to block the driveway where Russell's Mercedes and my mother's new Audi, a gift from Veronica and Russell, sat gleaming. Juggling the pie carrier, my purse, and 1 folding chair, I made my way to the front door. I'd have to make multiple trips for the other chairs, but the pie took priority. Balancing awkwardly, I pressed the doorbell with my elbow and waited. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see movement inside, people passing through the foyer, the flash of Veronica's blonde hair. I shifted the weight of the pie and rang again. No answer. After the 3rd ring, I set the pie down carefully on the porch bench and pulled out my phone. 3 new text messages had arrived while I'd been driving. Mom, running late as usual? Veronica, we're all waiting on you to carve the turkey. And then, most recently, use the back door. Guests come through the front. I stared at the last message, heat rising in my cheeks. Guests used the front door. Not family. Not the sister who'd brought the requested chairs and spent her precious free time baking. I'd been demoted to staff status, expected to enter through the service entrance like a caterer. From where I stood, I could see through the side windows into the living room. My family lounged comfortably, drinks in hand, laughing at something Russell was saying. They weren't waiting on me to carve anything. They hadn't even set a place for me at the main table. I could see that now, counting the elaborate place settings visible through the dining room doorway. For a moment, I considered leaving, getting back in my car and driving home, spending the day in blissful solitude with leftover pizza and mindless television. No subtle jabs about my career, no pitying glances at my sensible clothes, no relegation to second-class status. But some stubborn part of me refused to give them the satisfaction. With burning eyes and a tight chest, I gathered my things and trudged around the side of the house, past manicured shrubs and decorative planters, to the kitchen entrance at the back. This door stood plain and unadorned, meant for bringing in groceries or taking out trash. I shifted the pie to my hip and knocked sharply, feeling my dignity drain away with each second I stood there, an unwelcome outsider at my own family's Thanksgiving. Veronica opened the back door with a martini glass in hand, her expression momentarily blank as if she'd forgotten I was coming. "Oh, you're here," she said, stepping back barely enough for me to squeeze past with my armload of belongings. "You can put that whatever it is on the counter." "It's Grandma's apple pie," I said, setting the carrier down on the only empty space I could find amid the catering containers and expensive-looking serving dishes. We already have dessert covered," Veronica replied, gesturing toward an elaborate spread of professionally made pies and tarts arranged on the island. "But it's thoughtful." The kitchen bustled with activity. Two women I didn't recognize arranged appetizers on silver platters while my mother supervised, clipboard in hand as if coordinating a military operation rather than a family dinner. "Abigail, finally," my mother said, looking up. "Your hair looks interesting today. Trying something new?" I self-consciously touched my carefully styled waves. "Just wore it down for once." "Bold choice," she replied with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Russell's friends are here, so try to make conversation about something other than your hospital stories. Nobody wants to hear about bodily fluids during dinner." "I need to get the rest of the chairs from my car," I said, ignoring the jab. "Just put them in the garage when you're done," she replied, already turning back to her clipboard. I made 2 more trips to retrieve the folding chairs, stacking them in the garage as instructed. When I returned to the kitchen, everyone had migrated to the living room except for the catering staff, who politely worked around me as if I were just another obstacle. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my sweater and entered the living room where voices rose in animated conversation. My father sat in a leather recliner, eyes fixed on a football game playing on the massive wall-mounted television. He acknowledged me with a distracted nod. "Hey, Dad." "Abigail," he said, not looking away from the screen. "Drive okay?" Check engine light came on again. "Should get that looked at," he mumbled, wincing as a player fumbled on screen. Russell stood by the fireplace, holding court with 2 men in expensive-looking sweaters. My nephew Tyler, now 8, sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, completely absorbed in a tablet that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "There she is," Russell called out when he spotted me, with the exaggerated enthusiasm of someone who'd already had several drinks. "The working girl. How's life saving lives, Abby?" I forced a smile. "It's going well. Actually, I recently got promoted to—" "That's great. That's great," he interrupted, clearly uninterested in the details. "Hey, let me introduce you. This is Carter and his wife Olivia. Carter's in commercial real estate, just closed a deal on that new shopping center by the highway." Carter extended a manicured hand. "Nice to meet you. Russell says you work at the hospital." "I'm a charge nurse in the ICU," I clarified. "My cousin's wife is a doctor," he replied, as if offering me hope that I too might someday achieve something worthwhile. Olivia smiled politely. "That must be intense." "It can be challenging, but rewarding," I started, ready to share something meaningful about my work, but Veronica swept in with fresh drinks. Abigail doesn't like talking about her job, she said smoothly. Too many sad stories. Carter, tell everyone about that vacation property you're looking at in Aspen. I retreated to the periphery of the group, becoming essentially invisible as the conversation turned to ski resorts and property values. After 15 awkward minutes of standing with a fixed smile, I returned to the kitchen under the pretense of offering help. Need an extra hand? I asked one of the catering staff, a young woman roughly my age who was arranging deviled eggs on a crystal platter. We've got it handled, she replied kindly. Mrs. Henderson was very specific about the presentation. Mrs. Henderson. Not Veronica. Not my sister. The formality stung somehow, highlighting the performance aspect of this gathering. Through the doorway, I overheard Veronica telling someone, "My sister works in healthcare," the deliberate vagueness erasing my actual accomplishments. When dinner was finally announced, I followed everyone into the dining room only to find there was no place for me at the elaborately decorated table. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and name cards in elegant calligraphy marked each setting. My mother noticed my confusion. "Oh, Abigail, we're a bit tight on space with Russell's friends here. I've set you up in the kitchen nook. It's actually quite cozy." The nook turned out to be a small table shoved against the kitchen wall, clearly meant for the household's everyday meals rather than special occasions. A single-place setting waited there, the everyday dishes a stark contrast to the holiday china everyone else would use. As I took my solitary seat, I noticed my homemade pie had been moved from its prominent position on the counter to a shelf in the pantry, hidden behind boxes of crackers. In its place, store-bought desserts were artfully arranged on cake stands. I sat alone at the small table, listening to the clink of fine china and the rise and fall of conversation from the other room, wondering how I had become such a stranger to my own family. The kitchen table's wooden chair creaked as I shifted uncomfortably. From my isolated position, I could hear, but not see the dining room festivities. Laughter erupted periodically, followed by the gentle clink of silverware against china. Someone, probably Russell, was telling a story about a golf tournament, his voice rising dramatically at what I assumed was the punchline. More laughter. The sound of wine being poured. My mother's voice chiming in with practiced charm. I stared down at my plate, loaded with turkey and sides that I'd served myself after everyone else had filled their plates. The catering staff had departed after setting out the food, leaving me truly alone in the kitchen. The food tasted like cardboard in my mouth. My mind drifted back to childhood Thanksgivings. Veronica and I setting the table together, arguing over who got the good plates. Dad carving the turkey while Mom fussed over the gravy. All four of us squeezed around our modest dining table, using the fancy tablecloth reserved for special occasions. When had that family disappeared? The divide had started subtly. After Veronica met Russell, she began spending holidays with his family instead of ours. "They do Thanksgiving at the country club," she'd explained, as if that automatically made it superior. When she did grace us with her presence, she'd critique everything from Mom's outdated centerpiece to the brands of ingredients used in the stuffing. Last Thanksgiving had been at Russell's parents' house, a gathering I'd been invited to almost as an afterthought. I'd been seated at a side table with distant relatives and had spent the evening fielding questions about whether I'd considered going to medical school instead of settling for nursing. My phone buzzed with a text from Hannah, my closest friend at the hospital. "Surviving family fun time?" I typed back. Eating alone in the kitchen while they feast in the dining room. New low. 3 dots appeared immediately. WTF? Want me to call with a fake emergency? The offer was tempting. I could claim a patient crisis, escape this house, and spend the evening with actual friends who valued me. But something kept me rooted to the uncomfortable chair.
Frida?
Stubbornness? Or perhaps the lingering hope that someone might notice my absence and realize how badly they'd treated me. A movement near my feet startled me. Oscar, Russell's golden retriever, had wandered into the kitchen and was looking up at me with hopeful eyes. Unlike his owners, Oscar showed no discrimination in who he befriended. I slipped him a small piece of turkey, receiving a grateful tail wag in return. "At least you appreciate me," I whispered, scratching behind his ears. Talking to the dog? I looked up to find Olivia, one of Russell's friends, entering the kitchen with an empty wine glass. "Just making friends where I can," I replied, trying to sound lighthearted rather than pathetic. She glanced toward the dining room, then back at me, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. "The wine's better company than some people anyway," she said quietly, refilling her glass from a bottle on the counter. "For what it's worth, I think what you do is amazing. My mom was in the ICU last year after her stroke. The nurses made all the difference." Before I could respond, Veronica appeared in the doorway. "Olivia, Carter was just about to tell everyone about your renovation plans." Her eyes darted between us suspiciously. "Coming," Olivia said, offering me a small smile before returning to the dining room. Left alone again, I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus, the ER doctor I'd been dating for 3 months. We'd planned to meet up later that evening after our respective family obligations. "Still on for tonight? Could use some normal human interaction after this disaster." His response came quickly. "Absolutely. Want to talk about it?"
Not now.
"But bring wine." "Lots of wine." "That bad?" "They made me use the back door, and I'm eating alone in the kitchen." "So yeah, that bad." I could almost see him shaking his head as he typed. "You deserve better. Why do you put up with it?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Why did I keep subjecting myself to this treatment? Was it some misguided sense of family duty? The fading hope that they'd eventually see my worth? Or just the uncomfortable reality that cutting off family, no matter how toxic, felt like admitting a kind of failure? I had no good answer, so I just replied, "See you at 8. Might be earlier if I can escape." From the dining room came the sound of dessert being served. My homemade pie remained hidden in the pantry, forgotten. I heard Veronica accepting compliments for the elaborate pastries she'd ordered. Not once did anyone call my name or suggest I join them. I sat there, fork pushing mashed potatoes around my plate, torn between walking out and staying just to prove I could endure it. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking each minute of my self-imposed isolation. That's when a sharp knock sounded at the back door. The knocking came again, 3 crisp raps that echoed through the kitchen. I glanced toward the dining room, but the animated conversation continued uninterrupted. Clearly, no one had heard it over their laughter and clinking glasses. With a sigh, I pushed back from the table and approached the door. Probably a late delivery, or perhaps one of the caterers returning for forgotten equipment. Given my apparent role as kitchen staff today, it seemed appropriate that I should answer. I opened the door to find an elegant older woman standing on the step. Silver hair cut in a stylish bob framed a face with striking cheekbones and intelligent eyes. She wore a tailored camel coat and held a small leather portfolio. "Hello," she said, her eyebrows rising slightly in surprise. I wasn't expecting anyone in the kitchen. "Hi," I replied awkwardly. "Are you looking for Veronica or Russell?" "I'm Eleanor Blackwood, the owner of this property," she explained, extending her hand. "I apologize for stopping by during a holiday, but I was in the neighborhood checking on another rental and wanted to inspect the kitchen sink. The plumber mentioned a potential issue with the disposal when he was here last week." I shook her hand, feeling oddly formal in my own family's gathering. "I'm Abigail, Veronica's sister." "Ah, family visiting for Thanksgiving. How lovely." Eleanor smiled warmly. "Do you mind if I come in just for a moment? I won't disturb your celebration." I stepped back, allowing her entry. "You're not disturbing much, at least not in here." Eleanor gave me a curious look as she set her portfolio on the counter. "Oh, is everyone finished with dinner already?" "No, they're still eating in the dining room," I said, gesturing toward my solitary place setting at the kitchen table. "I'm just eating in here." Eleanor paused, her eyes taking in the scene. My half-eaten meal, the single-place setting, the sounds of merriment from the other room. Something shifted in her expression. "You're eating alone? On Thanksgiving?" Her tone held genuine confusion. I shrugged, embarrassment heating my cheeks. Space constraints, apparently. Too many guests. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. I designed this house with a dining room that seats 12 comfortably. How many people are here? 9, including me. A brief silence fell between us as Eleanor processed this information. Then, instead of immediately checking the sink as planned, she leaned against the counter and asked, "What kind of nursing do you do? I noticed your lanyard in your purse." Surprised by the question, I answered, "I'm a charge nurse in the ICU at Mercy General." "That must have been especially challenging these past few years," she said, genuine interest to her voice. "It was intense," I admitted. "We lost a lot of patients in the beginning before treatments improved. Some days I changed PPE so many times my face was raw from the mask straps." Eleanor nodded. "My late husband was hospitalized just before the pandemic. The nurses there were absolute angels, the only bright spots in an otherwise terrible experience. I've had enormous respect for your profession ever since." For the first time that day, I felt seen. Not as Veronica's less successful sister or the family disappointment, but as someone whose work held real value. I found myself sharing stories I normally kept to myself. The premature baby I'd helped save during a power outage, the elderly COVID patient who recovered against all odds, the thank you letter from a family that I kept pinned to my bulletin board. Eleanor listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that indicated she was truly engaged. When I mentioned my recent promotion to charge nurse, she congratulated me with sincere enthusiasm, the first person besides Marcus and my work friends to acknowledge the achievement. As we talked, Eleanor moved to examine the sink, testing the disposal with professional efficiency while continuing our conversation. "The healthcare system needs more people like you," she said. "Especially now, with so many nurses leaving the profession due to burnout." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching voices. Veronica appeared in the doorway, her perfect hostess smile freezing when she spotted Eleanor. "Mrs. Blackwood." "What a surprise," she exclaimed, quickly composing herself. "Is everything all right with the house?" "Just checking the disposal," Eleanor replied pleasantly. "Your sister has been keeping me company. She's been telling me about her work in the ICU. Absolutely fascinating." Russell materialized behind Veronica, alarm flickering across his face. "Eleanor, we didn't hear you come in." "I used the back door," Eleanor said, a new edge to her voice. "Apparently, that's the designated entrance for some family members today." An uncomfortable silence descended as Veronica and Russell exchanged glances. My mother appeared next, curiosity drawing her to the unexpected interruption. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between all of us. "This is Eleanor Blackwood," I explained. "She owns the house." "I was just telling Abigail how impressed I am with her work," Eleanor continued smoothly. "ICU nursing requires exceptional skill and dedication, especially during a pandemic. You must be very proud." My mother blinked, clearly thrown by this perspective. "Oh, yes, of course. Abigail has always been dedicated to her job." The dismissive undertone wasn't lost on Eleanor, whose eyebrows rose slightly. More family members had gathered in the doorway now, drawn by the commotion. My father, nephew Tyler, and Russell's friends Carter and Olivia. Eleanor looked around at the full kitchen, then back at my solitary table setting. "I'm curious," she said, her tone conversational but with steel underneath. "Why is your sister eating alone in the kitchen when there's clearly room for everyone at the dining table?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Veronica shifted uncomfortably. "We had the table already set when Abigail arrived, and with Carter and Olivia joining us." "I counted 9 people total," Eleanor interrupted gently. "The dining room seats 12. I should know, I designed it." Russell jumped in. "It was just a matter of the place settings and having her use the service entrance?" Eleanor asked, the polite veneer thinning. "I noticed Abigail's car has a hospital parking permit. She came here after working a night shift caring for critically ill patients, and you had her enter through the back door?" The kitchen had never been so silent. Even the football game's distant commentary seemed to have paused at a commercial break. Eleanor turned to me, her expression softening. "Abigail, before I became a real estate investor, I was a nurse. Not ICU, labor, and delivery, but I understand the dedication your work requires. She looked back at my family, who seemed frozen in place. I also understand the value of treating people with dignity, especially those who dedicate their lives to helping others. In that moment, standing in the kitchen with Eleanor's unexpected defense surrounding me like armor, I felt something shift. Not just in the room, but in me. Years of accepting second-class status in my own family suddenly seemed not just painful, but absurd. Eleanor's words had shattered the carefully maintained illusion that my treatment was normal or acceptable. And from the stunned expressions on everyone's faces, it was clear they knew it too. Veronica recovered first, her socialite training kicking in as she attempted to smooth over the awkward moment. "We certainly didn't intend to make Abigail feel unwelcome," she said with a practiced laugh. "It's just that with the formal dining arrangement already set. I requested extra chairs." I cut in, surprising myself with my steady voice. "Dad's folding chairs that I picked up and brought here specifically so there would be enough seating." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "And yet they remain in the garage." My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on Veronica's arm. "This is really just a misunderstanding. Our family has certain traditions and, like making one family member use the service entrance?" Eleanor asked, her tone polite but unyielding. Carter cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Olivia, we should probably head out. Let the family sort this." "Actually," Olivia interrupted, surprising everyone, "I think Eleanor has a point." She turned to Veronica and Russell. "We wouldn't have minded waiting for another place setting. It seems odd to have family eating separately." Carter looked pained but nodded in agreement. My father, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "She's right, Veronica. This isn't how we raised you girls to treat each other." Veronica's cheeks flushed pink. "Dad, please. You're hardly one to lecture about family values when you've been absent for years." Eleanor raised a hand slightly, defusing the escalating tension. "I didn't mean to cause family discord. But as someone who grew up in a household where appearances mattered more than people, I recognized the pattern." She turned to me. "Nursing taught me that what truly matters is how we care for one another when status and pretense are stripped away." She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a business card, offering it to me. "I'm involved with a medical real estate project, a new clinic in the downtown area. We need healthcare professionals to consult on the design. If you're interested, I'd love to get your input, especially given your ICU experience." I accepted the card, stunned by this unexpected turn. "I'd be happy to help." Eleanor smiled, then addressed Veronica and Russell. "The disposal seems to be working fine, but I'll have my regular maintenance team check it next week. Enjoy the rest of your holiday." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and I noticed a homemade pie in the pantry. Apple cinnamon, if I'm not mistaken. My absolute favorite." With that parting observation, Eleanor let herself out through the back door, leaving behind a kitchen filled with uncomfortable silence. Once she was gone, the atmosphere shifted palpably. My family seemed unsure how to proceed, caught between maintaining their facade and acknowledging the embarrassing truth Eleanor had exposed. Veronica broke the silence. "Well, that was awkward. Who knew our landlord would drop by unannounced on Thanksgiving?" "That's what you're concerned about?" I asked incredulously. "Not the fact that you made me use the back door and eat alone in the kitchen?" "Don't be so dramatic, Abigail," my mother interjected. "No one intended to hurt your feelings." "Intent doesn't change impact," I replied, the phrase borrowed from a hospital conflict resolution workshop suddenly feeling deeply personal. "You've been treating me like a second-class family member for years, and I've tolerated it because I guess I thought that's what family loyalty meant." Russell shifted uncomfortably. "Look, why don't we all move to the living room for coffee? We can pull up another chair for Abigail." "I don't want a pity invitation," I said firmly. "What I want is for someone to acknowledge that what happened today wasn't okay." My sister crossed her arms defensively. "You always do this. Turn every family gathering into a referendum on your feelings. Some of us are trying to build successful lives and connections, and yes, Sometimes that means paying attention to appearances. Appearances, I repeated slowly. Like having a nurse in the family who doesn't fit your image of success? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. And what's most ironic is that you're not even honest about your own circumstances. You rent this house, but pretend you own it. You talk about Russell's business like it's thriving when I know from Dad that you're having financial problems. Russell's face darkened. That's private family business. Exactly, I agreed. Family business. Which I apparently am only part of when it's convenient. My father stepped forward, surprising everyone. Abigail's right. I've been complicit in this for too long. He turned to Veronica. Your sister has built a meaningful career, helping people when they're at their most vulnerable. That deserves respect, not condescension. My mother looked stricken. Ralph, you can't possibly think I don't respect Abigail's job. It's not a job, Mom, I said quietly. It's a profession. One that kept me working 70-hour weeks during the worst of the pandemic while you were attending Veronica's socially distanced garden parties. Tyler, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly piped up. Aunt Abby helped save people during COVID. My friend Jake's dad was in the ICU, and he said the nurses were heroes. Out of the mouths of babes. I felt a surge of affection for my nephew, who somehow saw what the adults in his life had missed. Olivia touched Carter's arm. We really should go. Thank you for dinner, but I think your family needs some privacy. After they left, the artificial cordiality that had been holding the gathering together completely dissolved. Veronica retreated to the kitchen, loudly rearranging dishes as if the clattering could drown out the uncomfortable truths that had been spoken. My mother followed her, their hushed but intense conversation audible even from the hallway. Rather than join another performative family moment, I knelt beside Tyler. Thanks for sticking up for me, buddy. He shrugged. It's just true. We learned about healthcare workers in school. Plus, you always talk to me about real stuff, not just boring grown-up things like houses and cars. I realized then that I had a choice. I could stay and endure the strained remainder of this holiday, accepting whatever token gestures of inclusion my family might now offer out of embarrassment rather than genuine remorse. Or I could leave with my dignity intact, having finally spoken my truth. Tyler, I'm going to head out, but I'll see you soon, okay? Maybe we can go to that science museum exhibit you mentioned last time. His face lit up. The one with the dinosaur fossils? For real. For real, I promised, giving him a quick hug. I gathered my belongings, retrieved my untouched pie from the pantry, and found my father in the foyer. I'm leaving, Dad. He nodded, looking older and more tired than I'd noticed before. This isn't how families should treat each other. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. It's not too late to change things, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. But it has to be real change, not just temporary guilt. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The back door incident hadn't just been a humiliation, it had been the catalyst I needed to finally stand up for myself. Eleanor's unexpected appearance had merely illuminated what had been true all along. I deserved better than the scraps of respect my family had been offering. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Still on for tonight? I smiled as I typed back. Absolutely. And I have a homemade pie that needs eating. The hospital corridors felt comfortingly familiar when I returned to work the day after Thanksgiving. The rhythmic beeping of monitors, the squeaking of sensible shoes on linoleum, the hushed conversations at the nurse's station. This was a world where I knew my worth, where my contributions mattered. There she is, Hannah called as I approached the break room. Survivor of the family Turkey Day massacre. How bad was it? I poured myself coffee before sitting across from her. Remember how I told you I was eating alone in the kitchen? It actually got worse, and then bizarrely better. I recounted the entire story, from the backdoor instruction to Eleanor's unexpected intervention and my final confrontation with my family. Hannah's expressions shifted from outrage to satisfaction as the tale unfolded. So you just left? Queen behavior, she declared when I finished. Please tell me you're done with their toxic holiday gatherings. I'm done with accepting their treatment, I clarified. But I'm not sure I'm ready to cut them off entirely. After my shift, I met Marcus at our favorite diner. Over plates of leftover turkey sandwiches, I shared the full Thanksgiving saga again. I've been telling you for months that you deserve better, he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I'm proud of you for finally standing up for yourself. It feels like the first honest interaction I've had with my family in years, I admitted. Painful, but necessary. The weekend passed in a blur of work shifts and quiet evenings with Marcus. By Monday, my phone showed several missed calls from my mother and sister, which I deliberately didn't return. I needed space to process everything before engaging with them again. What I didn't expect was a text from my father on Tuesday. Coffee tomorrow. Just us. We met at a small cafe halfway between the hospital and his office. Dad arrived first, 2 cups already on the table when I slid into the booth. Thanks for coming, he said, pushing a latte toward me. I've been doing a lot of thinking since Thanksgiving. Me too, I replied cautiously. He stared into his coffee. I owe you an apology, Abby. Not just for Thursday, but for years of not seeing you. Really seeing you. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. My father had never been one for emotional conversations. After your mother and I divorced, I retreated into myself, he continued. And when Veronica started climbing the social ladder with Russell, I think I was impressed. Maybe even a little intimidated. It seemed easier to go along with their version of success than to question it. And my version didn't qualify, I said, not as an accusation but as a simple statement of fact. He shook his head. I was wrong. So wrong. Watching you stand up to them, to all of us, made me realize how much I've compromised my own values. The things that used to matter to me were never about status or appearances. What changed? I asked. Maybe seeing myself through Eleanor's eyes, he admitted. Or yours. I was raised to believe that a man provides for his family and protects them. But somewhere along the way, I started thinking that meant financial success above all else. I forgot that protecting also means standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground we hadn't touched in years. He shared his insecurities about his modest career compared to Russell's family wealth, how he'd felt inadequate after the divorce, and how he'd channeled that into pushing Veronica toward the social success he'd never achieved. I think I was living vicariously through her, he confessed. And in the process, I completely overlooked what you were building, something meaningful and genuinely worthwhile. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. Not a complete healing, but a foundation for something new, something authentic. Thursday brought another surprise. Eleanor Blackwood called, asking if I was still interested in consulting on her medical facility project. I meant what I said about needing input from working healthcare professionals, she explained. Too many medical spaces are designed by people who've never actually worked in them. We arranged to meet at her office the following week. When I arrived, I discovered it wasn't just a courtesy meeting. Eleanor was serious about incorporating my expertise into the clinic design. The project architect showed me preliminary plans, eagerly noting my suggestions about everything from the layout of patient rooms to the placement of sanitizing stations. This is exactly why we needed you, Eleanor said as we reviewed the modified plans. You think about the practical details that make a real difference in patient care. As we wrapped up, she hesitated before adding, I hope I didn't overstep at your family gathering. I've seen too many people diminished by those who should value them most. You didn't overstep, I assured her. If anything, you said what needed to be said for years. The first week of December brought an expected text from Veronica. Mom wants to know if you're coming to Christmas at her house. Need to finalize numbers. No apology. No acknowledgement of Thanksgiving. Just another demand for compliance with family tradition. I discussed it with my therapist, whom I'd started seeing shortly after the Thanksgiving incident. What do you want to do? She asked. Not what you feel obligated to do, but what would honor your needs. The answer came with surprising clarity. I didn't want to subject myself to another performance of family harmony. But I also didn't want to spend the holiday alone, nursing resentment. I'm hosting my own Christmas gathering this year, I texted back. Small dinner at my place on Christmas Eve. You're welcome to come. My mother called immediately. What do you mean you're not coming to Veronica's? We always do Christmas together. Things change, Mom. I'm creating new traditions that work for me. This is about Thanksgiving, isn't it? You're punishing us for one little misunderstanding. I took a deep breath. It wasn't a misunderstanding, and I'm not punishing anyone. I'm choosing to spend the holiday in a way that feels good and authentic to me. But your sister has already planned everything. What will people think if you're not there? That's exactly the problem, I replied calmly. You're more concerned about appearances than how family members actually feel. The conversation ended unresolved, but I felt peaceful with my decision. I invited Marcus, Hannah and her husband, my father and his girlfriend Catherine, and to my surprise, received a tentative acceptance from Tyler, pending his parents' approval. Most unexpected was the call from Veronica 3 days later. So, you're really doing your own Christmas? She asked without preamble. Yes, I am. A long pause. I may have been harsh at Thanksgiving. Coming from Veronica, this qualified as a significant admission. It wasn't just Thanksgiving, I said. It's been years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that I don't quite measure up. Another silence. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I, completely, I admitted. But not pretending everything is fine would be a start. Real relationships have conflict and resolution, not just performance and avoidance. I'll think about coming to your Christmas thing, she said finally. Not promising, but I'll think about it. It wasn't an apology, but it was the most genuine exchange we'd had in years. As I hung up, I looked around my modest apartment with new eyes. For so long, I'd seen it through my family's judgmental gaze. Too small, too simple, not impressive enough. Now I saw the cozy reading nook where I unwound after difficult shifts, the kitchen where I baked stress away on my days off, the walls adorned with photos of places I'd actually visited and people I genuinely cared about. This was my life, not glamorous by Veronica's standards, perhaps, but authentic and meaningful. A life built on caring for others, on genuine connections rather than strategic ones. Eleanor had been right. What matters most is how we care for one another when status and pretense are stripped away. My family had failed that test for years, but perhaps, just perhaps, the painful honesty triggered by a backdoor slight was the beginning of something truer. As I placed a small Christmas tree in my living room window, I thought about how sometimes the most unexpected gifts come disguised as humiliations. Being sent to the back door had finally pushed me to stand up for myself, to demand the respect I deserved. And that was worth more than any place setting at the fancy table. If you've ever felt like the family outsider or struggled with toxic relatives who don't value you, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. How did you handle it?
Did you stay or walk away?
Remember to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. We're building a community here of people who choose authenticity over appearance, and your voice matters. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the path to self-respect starts at the back door.